My name is Myrtle Truo. I'm 18 now, but the story I'm about to tell feels like it belongs to someone else. It's complicated, tangled, and not something I ever expected to experience, let alone discuss. I grew up in a home that appeared perfect to the outside world. My mom, Caroline, had a remarkable career, a demanding job that earned the admiration and respect of everyone around her. People often called her an inspiration. However, behind closed doors, things were different. She was constantly busy, always away, and when she was home, she seemed distant. It wasn't just because of work. It felt like she didn't know how to connect with me, or perhaps she didn't want to. I'd loved her, and I still do, but love doesn't always equate to understanding. There were nights when I sat alone in my room, wondering if she even realized how lonely I was. And then there was Greg, my stepdad. He entered our lives when I was about 13. At first, I wasn't sure about him. He wasn't like my mom. She was sharp and no nonsense, while he was laid back and friendly. He'd joke around and talk to me like I mattered. For a while, I believed he was the one holding our family together. I wish I could say everything stayed simple, that I was just a teenager going through the usual teenage struggles. But that's not how it played out. Looking back, I can't pinpoint when things started to change. Maybe it was the nights when mom worked late and Greg and I ended up watching TV together, or perhaps it was the way he looked at me sometimes, as though I wasn't just a kid anymore. All I know is that something shifted, subtly but undeniably. This isn't the type of story you casually share with a friend over coffee, nor something you laugh about later in life. It's heavy and uncomfortable, but it's my reality. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that avoiding the truth doesn't make it disappear. I don't know if telling this story will bring me closure or make me feel more vulnerable, but I do know that stories like mine are more common than people want to admit. Maybe, just maybe, someone will hear this and feel less isolated. Growing up, my mom always seemed like she was running out of time. Meetings, deadlines, phone calls, they consumed her days. Even when she was at home, she seemed to be somewhere else entirely. If she wasn't glued to her laptop, she was pacing the house on the phone, shouting out quick instructions like, "Dinner's in the fridge, don't forget to lock the door, good night, Myrtle." There was no warmth, no moments where she'd pause and truly be present. I told myself it was normal. After all, she was providing for us, making sure we had a roof over our heads, and that I had what I needed. But even as a kid, I knew something was missing, though I didn't know how to express it or who to talk to about it. That's when Greg came into the picture. When mom married him, it was like a switch flipped in our house. He had this way of making everything feel easier, as if life didn't have to be so serious all the time. He'd sit down and talk to me, really talk. Not just about school or chores, but about things I liked, books I was reading, TV shows I was watching, things that made me laugh. It felt nice. No, more than nice. For the first time in years, it felt like someone in the house actually saw me. The funny thing is, I didn't even realize how much I needed that until it happened. Greg filled a gap I didn't know existed. But here's the problem with filling a void like that. It's complicated. It's easy for boundaries to blur, for roles to become unclear. At first, it was small things. The way he'd smile at me when I shared a story, like he was hanging on every word, or how he'd notice when something was off with me, even when I didn't say anything. He was attentive, caring, and kind. It felt good, too good maybe. One night stands out clearly. Mom was working late again, and it was just Greg and me at home. He made a simple dinner like pasta, and we sat down together. I remember talking to him about a fight I had with a friend at school, frustrated and on the verge of tears. He just listened. Not in that distracted way adults sometimes do, but with real attention. When I finished, he reached across the table and put his hand on mine. It was a small gesture, but it felt huge. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Myrtle, you're amazing. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you're not." I don't know why, but those words hit me hard, harder than they should have. After that, I started noticing more things. He'd compliment me, telling me how smart I was or how good my heart was. He'd find ways to spend more time with me, asking for my help with things around the house. Nothing overt, nothing I could point to and say, "This is wrong." But it was there, this shift that I think we both felt. Looking back, I wonder if things could have been different if I'd recognized it for what it was and stopped it before it went too far. But at the time, it didn't feel dangerous. It felt safe, like someone actually cared. Before I continue, I just want to say that this story is hard for me to tell. It's raw and tangled, and there are parts I wish I could forget. But if sharing it helps someone else feel less alone, then it's worth it. If this resonates with you, please take a moment to like, share, or subscribe. It's a small way to show you're listening and that this story matters. Thank you. There comes a point where confusion starts to feel like an unrelenting weight, pulling at you and keeping you up at night, making you question everything your choices, your feelings, even who you are. That's where I found myself with Greg. I wish I could say it hit me suddenly, that it came out of nowhere, and I had no time to process it, but that's not how it happened. It crept up slowly like water seeping into cracks before you even realized the damage. I started looking forward to the time we spent together, but not in a casual way, in a way that made my stomach twist when I thought about it later. Greg wasn't naive. He must have noticed. He began opening up to me more, talking about things that felt intimate, how difficult it was to keep the house running with Mom gone so much, or how lonely he sometimes felt. I had never thought of adults as lonely, but when he said it, I believed him. It made me feel closer to him, like we understood each other in a way no one else did. Then there were the little things, the way he'd touch my shoulder when walking past, or sit just a little too close on the couch. Nothing obvious, nothing anyone else would notice, but enough to make my heart race. I began second-guessing myself, wondering if I was imagining it or if there was something more happening between us. At night, I'd lie in bed, replaying everything in my mind, his smile, the little touches, the way he listened at me, the way he laughed at my jokes, the way he looked at me as if I wasn't just a child, but someone who mattered. Those things made me despise myself. I hated that I couldn't stop feeling that way. And I hated myself even more for not being able to make it end. One day, he asked me to help him fix a leak under the kitchen sink. It seemed like such a trivial thing, so ordinary, but it felt different. We were so close, and I could sense the tension even though neither of us spoke. When we finished, he looked at me and said, "You're such a big help, Myrtle. I don't know what I'd do without you." It was just a simple remark, but it lingered in my mind for days. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and that's when the guilt began to creep in. I knew it wasn't right. I knew I shouldn't be feeling what I was feeling, but knowing didn't make it go away. If anything, it made it worse. I'd catch myself daydreaming about him, then snap out of it, feeling like the worst person in the world. I tried to stay away from him, but it never lasted. He was always there, always kind, always Greg. I started wondering if he felt the same. Was I just a kid with a crush, or was there something real between us? I didn't know, and I couldn't know. But the uncertainty was unbearable, and I wanted to talk to someone about it. I wanted to say it out loud, but who could I tell? My friends wouldn't understand, and my mom was hardly around, so I kept it to myself, pretending everything was okay, even as I felt like I was falling apart. It all started on a night that seemed no different than any other. My mom had gone out for the evening, probably a business dinner or some networking event, and left me home alone with Greg. It wasn't unusual. She trusted him. And honestly, so did I. Greg and I spent the evening watching TV, half-heartedly paying attention to a random movie. I remember curling up on one side of the couch with him on the other. At first, it felt normal, even comforting. But somewhere during the movie, I shifted uncomfortably, tugging at my jeans. I joked that they felt tight, saying I was getting fat. It was an offhand comment, something I said to cover up how self-conscious I felt. Greg turned to me and said, "You're not fat, Myrtle. You're beautiful." His tone was calm, almost too calm. I didn't know what to say, so I awkwardly laughed, trying to brush it off. But then he moved closer, and his hand rested lightly on my knee, just for a moment. "You really are, you know," he said. "Hey, you're beautiful." The word felt so heavy coming from him, like it carried more weight than it should have. I froze. My heart raced, and I felt heat rising to my face. I told myself I was imagining it, that it wasn't what it seemed. But then he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a quick peck, nothing like a brief mistake. It was slow, deliberate, full of intent. And I didn't move. I didn't pull away. I just sat there, shocked and confused, unsure of what was even happening. My mind screamed that this was wrong, but my body didn't listen. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying the moment in my head, trying to understand why he had done it. Was it my fault? Was I overthinking it? I felt sick with guilt, but the curiosity wouldn't let me go. So a couple of days later, I went to him. He was in the kitchen, casually making himself coffee, as if nothing had happened. I asked him about the kiss. I wanted him to deny it, to tell me it was a mistake and that it wouldn't happen again. But instead, he looked at me and said, "Myrtle, I've had feelings for you for a while now. You're the reason I've stayed with your mom." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to scream, run away, do anything but stand there and listen to him justify what he'd done. But I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, and then he kissed me again. This time I pushed back. I told him it wasn't right, that it couldn't happen. But he didn't stop. He told me I was special, that he couldn't help how he felt. His hands were on me, on my shoulders, my waist, and I felt trapped, like there was no way out. I should have run. I should have fought harder, but I didn't. And I hated myself for it. When it was over, he acted like nothing had happened. He cleaned up his coffee cup and asked if I wanted anything to eat, as if it was just another normal night. But it wasn't normal. It was the night everything I thought I knew about trust, about family, about myself, shattered completely. The relationship lasted for about 9 months, even though it was rocky for much of it. At one point, I got kicked out of the house after a fight with my mom. I don't even remember what it was about, but I packed my things and left. For a while, I thought that was the end. I thought leaving the house would mean I was out of his reach, that maybe I could breathe again. But I'd visit on weekends. Not for him, I told myself, but to see my mom. Even then, I felt his presence, like he was waiting for a chance to get close again. I'd catch him staring at me during dinner, or he'd find excuses to talk to me alone. It made my skin crawl. I hated him, but I hated myself even more for not doing anything, for not telling anyone. By Christmas, I had moved back in with my mom. We had made up, and she welcomed me back like nothing had happened. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could move on. I was doing better. I was starting to feel more stable. I was even getting ready to stop taking my antidepressants and mood stabilizers. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could see a future where I wasn't drowning in guilt and confusion. But Greg didn't let go. He didn't understand, or maybe he didn't care that I was done. I told him it was over. I told him that if he ever touched me again, I'd tell my mom. I thought I'd made myself clear, but I was wrong. He started creeping into my room at night, just sitting there, watching me sleep. Sometimes he'd wake me up, whispering things I didn't want to hear. It was like he was trying to remind me that he still had control, that no matter how much I wanted to move on, he wouldn't let me. What made it worse was how bold he became. He'd make comments in front of my mom, things that seemed innocent but carried so much weight beneath them. And she never noticed. She thought he was talking to her, not me. I don't know if I wanted her to figure it out or if I was terrified she would. Maybe it was both. The relationship finally ended when I started dating someone else. I had been with this guy for almost 9 months, a real relationship, one that didn't make me feel sick inside. Being with him made me realize just how wrong everything with Greg had been. I felt like I could breathe again, like I could finally start putting the pieces of myself back together. But Greg didn't stop. He still found ways to insert himself into my life, to remind me of the mess we'd made, and then one day, it all came crashing down. My mom found out. I don't even know how, whether she overheard something or finally saw what I couldn't hide. All I know is that one night she confronted me and the truth spilled out before I could stop it. Everything. The months of secrecy, the lies, the guilt I'd been carrying around like a weight on my chest. She didn't say much, she just cried, and then she called the police. Greg was arrested. He tried to deny it, of course. Tried to say I was the one who misunderstood, the one who led him on. But the truth was out, and there was no going back. I thought this would bring me relief, that maybe I'd finally be free of him. But it didn't feel that way. It just felt empty. My boyfriend broke up with me. He couldn't handle it, couldn't wrap his head around what had happened. I think he thought I'd cheated on him with Greg. I didn't know how to explain it to him, so I didn't. My friends were split. Some stuck by me, telling me it wasn't my fault, that I'd been manipulated and unstable. Others cut me off completely. I couldn't blame them. I didn't know what to believe about myself, so how could I expect anyone else to? Now, I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward. I'm not looking for pity. I know what happened was disgusting, and I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. But I also know I was young, confused, and manipulated by someone who should have known better. I'm trying to learn how to forgive myself, even if I'm not sure I deserve it. So here I am, putting it all out there. not for attention, but because I don't know what else to do. If you've listened this far, thank you. I don't know what I'm hoping to find by sharing this, but maybe someone out there has been through something similar. Maybe someone has advice on how to move forward, how to heal. I'm listening, and I'm trying to believe that it's not too late to put the pieces of myself back together. If you've made it to the end, it means more to me than I can express. Please, if you think this story could help someone else, share it. And if you want to follow along as I figure out where to go from here, like and subscribe. Your support means everything right now, more than I can put into words. Thank you.